Currently on the Bitcoin network, only specialized nodes mine for blocks. In the LARP, we're still very early in our chain's life, so every node on the network will be mining for blocks. You should have a mempool full of transactions that are good candidates for being included into a block. Now we're going to pick through them and find the ones that we want to include in our block template. Getting into a block is competitive. In our LARP game, blocks can hold at most 4 transactions. One of those transactions will be the Coinbase transaction, which hands out new Bitcoin to the miner and allows them to collect transaction fees. That means that we can pick up to 3 transactions for the mempool to include in our block as well. This limit to the size of the block means that transactions must compete with each other to pay the miner enough fees for them to include that transaction into the block they're building, over and above other similar transactions. All of the fees that the miner collects will be added to the Coinbase reward that they give themselves in the Coinbase transaction. As a block builder, you'll have to create and include your own Coinbase transaction. We saw the Genesis block made a mistake when calculating how much Bitcoin they could get in their Coinbase. Be careful not to make the same mistake in your Coinbase transaction. Okay, let's build our first block template for Bitcoin. Miners build a block template first, and then they try to find a winning nonce for that template. We need 3 things to build our block template: a Coinbase transaction that we'll need to write, a set of up to 3 transactions from the mempool that we'll want to include in a block, and an almost completed block header card. Let's start by finding the transactions from the mempool that we want to include. In the mempool, let's pick 3 transactions for our block. You can pick any transactions that you want, but only 3 of them. You may want to pick based on how much each transaction pays you in fees, or if a transaction is yours and you want it included. Be careful that if a transaction's inputs lists a transaction ID that is also in the mempool, you need to include that transaction as well. Once you've identified the transactions that you want to include, find the block transaction ID card. On this card, you'll write the transaction IDs of the transactions from the mempool that you're including. Place this card with the transaction IDs inside of your block template envelope. Next, we need to add a Coinbase transaction to the block. Take a new transaction card and add a TXID of your choice. Also, X out the inputs. We'll make the transaction ID of our Coinbase Lion11. Usually, a Coinbase has one output, which pays to the miner's key. Place your color lock onto the Coinbase output at index 0. Finally, the amount that a miner can add to the Coinbase is the new block fee, which is 50 Bitcoin, plus any fees the transactions you included left you. Add up 50 and the transaction fees and write this into the amount field. Finally, place your Coinbase transaction inside your block template. The last step for building a block template is to fill in the block header. Find a blank block header card and fill in the following information. The previous block hash goes in the first field. We should be able to find this from the Genesis block since we're building the next block in the chain. The hash for our Genesis block was 7657. The next field is the transaction commitment. We need to calculate this from all the transactions in the block. Look at the compact block card with a list of transaction IDs and add up the numbers from the transaction IDs. Then add to this the number from the Coinbase transaction that you wrote. For our block, the sum of all the transaction ID numbers is 186. We'll write this into our block header. The time we'll get off of our phone, for this I'll just use 14:59. The target for our LARP is 8,500. We'll fill this in. All we're missing now is the block knots. To find this, we'll need to start mining. Congrats! You've built your first block template. We're now ready to put this information into our basics and start looking for a winning knots value.